Welcome to the Mindfulness Academy Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Morgan, and today I am so happy to introduce you to our guest. Welcome, Purvi Lippincott. She currently sits on the board and serves as Chief Operating Officer for Indy Yoga Movement, a nonprofit which provides yoga and mindfulness practices to schools in central Indiana. She has been teaching for 10 years and is credentialed as an experienced 500-hour accredited yoga teacher and continued education provider, having completed over 1,000 hours of training and nearly 5,000 hours of teaching experience. Wow. She has studied around the world and teaches a variety of styles of yoga, including restorative, vinyasa, and katona. Did I say that right? All right.
Got it.
She uses breath practices in her daily practice and with her own children and finds this part of yoga most accessible and helpful in the current season of her life. She leads group classes, mentorships, seasonal offerings, as well as advanced practitioner trainings in person and virtually. Welcome, Purvi.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for having me in the Mindfulness Academy. I'm so delighted.
This is going to be a great conversation. I believe we were connected by way of one of our former podcast guests, Jessica Gershman, who is wonderful and does so much in the yoga community as well. So I'm so excited that she connected us. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your work and educational background. Tell us the highlights of Purvi.
Oh, okay. Well, I was born in the States. I spent a little time between here and India. So I got to do some schooling there and I got to do some schooling here. But I've spent most of my childhood adult growing up and graduated from high school in Michigan. I ended up at Ball State. On an academic scholarship, and I studied pre-law, and then I ended up in Indy thinking I might go to law school. Worked for some defense attorneys and state attorneys offices, and then I ended up at the state house as a legislative assistant
Here in Indiana, right?
here in Indiana. Yeah, the state. And so I was here doing that in Indianapolis after graduating from Ball State, and then I got as far as taking the LSATs and then just decided it was not for me. And after policy, I ended up down the path of yoga. And so I've been in this place for 10 years, which is kind of wild when I think back on. I've done a lot of different things over time, and it's the one thing I've done for the most extended amount of time,
Absolutely. Tell us about that jump. I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, but this jump from I might do law and I'm working in policy to yoga. Tell me about that hop.
Yeah, well, I service is a really big part of growing up where I came from, and advocacy. My mom, my grandmother, posted with Mahatma Gandhi. It is just in our values. My mom went to strike at her own med school, like when she was in pre-med school in India, and it is just and to give back. And so so I had always I think it was her dream to be an attorney, her mom's dream for her to be a doctor. So in some way I was kind of like trying to like bring this idea of like mother daughters have the same vision. We want to go out and do helpfulness in the world, and there's an audience that could really use it. So I had thought I'd work in some way more service as an attorney or as in legal services. And then when I saw the work, it just looked sad and hard. And like, it didn't, the idea and then the work didn't meet, in that quality. And I noticed, and I was like, they're really struggling. So where can we go? And an opportunity came up to pursue a job at the state house here in Indianapolis. And I landed there for a while. But who get policymakers into their places and the policies they make and vote in. And we're really seeing that, I think, right now in society, what's being made, what's being passed, and what people want are a bit of a dissonance. And Yeah. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to the people. I'm just going to go work with the people. And like, if there are people that are out there and they can see themselves as potent and possible, and that there is endless potential for them, and that they are not alone in that, and that the world is an abundant place, and they have the resources within themselves to find that, then that's what I'm going to try to do, I suppose. And it fit. That puzzle piece was like trying to figure out what angle to put it, almost like a 3D, and it's like you have to find the right spot, and then everything kind of click, click, click came together, and
Yep.
here we are.
That is beautiful. And I have to pause and say, okay, go back to the Gandhi piece. What?
Oh, I know we
Okay,
didn't
that
get
didn't
that.
come up. That
I
was kind of
know.
the lead was buried. Okay, tell me about this. You have this beautiful family with a heart of service. Okay, tell me about this. What happened?
Well, we were India was colonized by Britain for a long time, and so during partition building all that up, there was. I mean, he was known for his silent protests and he was an attorney actually, right? And he was in Africa, and that's doing work and seeing how things were going, because you had other colonized nations there and extensions of the British Empire that went over. And so that's where my mom lived. That's my mom was born in Uganda. She grew up in Kenya. And then when her dad passed away, he worked for a company that was affiliated with the colonies there or the cities there or whatever it is. And but he passed. He was in a horrific car accident and passed away, and so they moved back to India.
Okay.
But during that time, Gandhi, when he was in Africa, was working on these things and brought these ideas of us, really becoming our own nation again, India, like claiming itself, and how do we do it? And so in some of the silent protests, my grandmother was at one, and she was arrested in jail. And I mean, in that group of them, in that time, in that era. So my mom's mother, yeah, it's pretty special, piece of history for us. And we did, we were able to break away from the monarchy and the nation. I mean, that's not perfect there. There's still so much to be done, but as is everywhere. So that's in my blood. It's in my blood.
It's in
It's
your
in my blood.
blood. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that. I have goosebumps. How cool
Ah,
for you and your family to have that part in your history and in the history of India. So thank you for sharing
yeah.
that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I
Guys.
know it slipped right in. I just like it snuck it in there.
Um, Tell me about your journey to yoga and mindfulness. I sometimes use those kind of interchangeably, and I'll probably do that today because to me, yoga is mindfulness and mindfulness is yoga because you're being aware of your body and your breath and your place in relationship to everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I think contentment, right? To receive where we are and be and attune to it is a piece of that. And after having for so long spent my time trying to figure it out from the outside in, trying to make it look a certain way on the outside, do the work on the outside, I was really finding yoga was giving me that opportunity to go inside and really own it for myself. And it was a hard decision when I left, and I was trying to figure out how to do this next thing. And it was like I had this instinct in me was like, go out and become a yoga teacher. I like proclaimed it. There was like sake involved, and it was like, we're just like the last day, and it was like, this is what I want, and like a joyous like proclamation. And so I really started practicing consistently. I was on my mat regularly. I was learning about more of the stories I grew up with, whether it was the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana. And so I knew these ideas and stories, and this appeal and this potential to just be with what we are. And I think that mindfulness is really that, our intentional attention to something. Daniel Goleman is a brilliant um, journalist and scientist out there, scientific journalist is like, sometimes I think is what he references himself. But I heard that version of a description. It's like, what is mindfulness? It's our intentional attention to something. And if we do that, these ideas, these ancient ideas are saying that, when we put ourselves in something, we put divinity into it. We make it sacred because we bring ourselves to it, and we are special, and we are valuable, and we hold potency. And so to see that every moment kind of carries a bit of that with us. Nice thing about windows, natural light, also lots of pedestrians. Give me 1 second. I'm going to take care of these guys. So, as I was saying, the intentional attention quality of it, I found that, and I was moving my body not to make it look a certain way or do a certain thing. It was purely for me, and I could start working both my mind and my body. And I was really seeing that, and I just wanted to do it. There's something innately pulling me like a string, you feel like
Understand.
that thing. Yeah. And so that was how I made that kind of jump. And it was two of my good guy friends that had recommended yoga. And I was like, well, if these two can say that they've got really great things to say about it, then okay, I'm gonna give it a go. And so yeah, just practice to my first training, then my second training, and third and fourth trainings, and many trainings later, here we are.
And have you always practiced yoga? I mean, is that part of your blood too? Does your family practice yoga?
Yeah, well, my mom does a lot of breath work, pranayama practice. They do a lot of the meditative work, the ceremonial or ritual work of it. She used to read the Mahabharata every year. Within that, which is this 7,000 verse text, it has the Bhagavad Gita, which is the story of Arjuna and Krishna. And it's this what are our dharmas? What are the things we have to go to in life? And what are these yogic tools that can help us take on the obstacles life is going to bring us anyway? And us seeing our own essential role in it, and then playing our part, and that being a part of a bigger part of something. And so that was there. My mother goes to India. She would travel and she'd go to a lot of holy sites visits, but also these theologists and theologians, and visit with them and go through theory and practice of breath work, and just kind of ways to optimize it and use it. And how, if we are energetic beings, if they can measure energy from our bodies, what is it that we put out in the world all the time, and really playing with that through breath work. And then also, the meditation practices. But postures was not a big thing for my family. It is something I found more here in this Western climate. Not that they don't have that there at all, but it's just, they have more of the other stuff as well.
Okay. So would you say in India there's more attention to breath work over posture? I don't know if you can answer that. I'm just kind of curious what your instinct would be.
I don't know if over, but I don't think it's as separated or as hierarchically placed as it is maybe in accessibility in the Western cultures, right? There's typically an avenue, and it's meditation or poses, and then the other stuff I feel like those are the two really big avenues. But there's many pieces to yoga, and I think in those traditions they really still have a lot of those other areas highlighted. And yeah, maybe that would be the
it feels like in the US you have yoga, you have meditation, which, conjures up the thought of a meditation cushion. Those feel like kind of two things. And breath work is kind of this river that flows between them, is kind of how it feels to me. That sometimes, it will touch the edge of it, but it doesn't always fully integrate as kind of those three all in one. That's in my mind how I've experienced it so far in the US. I feel like some of my yoga teachers they'll pay more attention to the breath and kind of guide us through it more than others. Some are more just kind of the postures, like you've talked about, the shapes. You talk about the shapes quite a bit, but internalizing those with the breath and the awareness of where we are. It's just folding it all in, into a recipe.
Yeah.
So
Well, the postures are archetypes, right? They tell stories. They ask us to hold, what is it to be a warrior? What is it to eagle pose, Garudasana. Garuda he was a mythological eagle that had a very important task at hand. And so he's the king of the birds of the eagles. And so it's that, and then we're gonna we're gonna wrap ourselves in tight. We're gonna get into these knots, or we're gonna get really consumed with ourselves. And what's the feeling of coming out of it and the flush of it? But what is like the potential of like mastering and the attention even through the difficulty? And I find eagle to be, for a while, it was like, and it's a joke I like to tell to my students or trainees when I like. I hated that pose. I don't even like to use the word hate, but I very much disliked that pose for a while. And so much so I had expressed it that sometimes teachers would mockingly, when they'd put it in class, be like, oh, we're going to use Purvi's favorite pose here next. And it was like, gosh, darn it, y'all, but eventually it's agitation. And now it's like something I really work to like make peace with, find opportunity and find the challenge to come on the other side. And then that's what the postures do for us. They provide samples of life's obstacles, and how do we transition between them, and how do we really stand in them, and how do we find presence while we're turned around like a pretzel, or stretching things that don't feel like they want to stretch, or so to speak.
Found
How
that
do we
a
deal with the sensations?
I found that a lot in yin yoga. I have over the years that is my favorite, because you do get really uncomfortable. It stretches out for minutes and you think, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then that feeling of returning to Shavasana and feeling, the body kind of come back together and reintegrate. It's just so fascinating. It's a
It
beautiful
is.
practice. I love that one. Do you do yin? Is that part of your restorative?
I do. I teach yin. I'll teach a yin class. I have trained in restorative yoga with Judith Lassiter, and then I've taken the Katona style of restorative, which is more about reforming the body, reinforming it, kind of getting it out of its habits, and so we're supporting it that way. But yin, I love it. It played a very important role for me. I think I did my first like 30-day challenge many years ago, and to do yoga 30 days in a row, multiple times, some days if you're catching up, right, trying to stay with the challenge, show discipline, practice. I could not do just like a power yoga every day. My body was like crumbling, and I would balance it with yin. And I took this 4:30 time slot with this beautiful teacher, Lindsay Maulers, and even after the challenge ended, it became my ritual. It was one thing I would not give up. Anytime anybody wanted to make plans for the weekend, and it was before kids, so I had all the time to make plans, and it was not until after 5:30 on Fridays. Like, I'm not available. This, like, I can meet you before, I can see you after, but this 1 hour is like sacred. It's devotional. It's mine, and I don't compromise it. And it really, it was. I think that one did a lot more work for me than a lot of those, up and downs and back and forths. And there's a need for all of it, and I love all of it. But there is something, like you say, special about holding there and stretching it out. And
Sitting with
restorative is more
discomfort.
prop-based. Yeah,
The
yeah.
sitting with the discomfort.
It's a
And realizing
stretchy
you can
discomfort.
survive. Yeah, that's the thing that it taught me. It was just, you can survive discomfort.
Yeah.
Notice it. What are the sensations?
Yeah, and then you get to add layers, and it's like, what are the meanings I'm adding to it, and how do I give myself a break from that, or like, what is, and then taking that off of your mat, doing that in traffic when there's construction in Indianapolis, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. you know
Oh, amen to the traffic. Amen to the
Ah,
construction traffic.
I know.
Yes. I'm wanting you to tell us. You've described what mindfulness really is to you, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm wondering if you could tell us about your trip back to India, where that fit into your journey. You say that yoga is a journey. I think it was 2014 you went to yoga, or went to India. Tell me about that, the purpose of the trip and what happened.
Yes. Okay. So I feel like it should be. I had been, after I left um, the policy world. I ended up in freelance. I had always had a job. And so I was kind of figuring things out. And by coincidence and connectors, my husband knew somebody that was there. I ended up working for Lululemon when they opened their store at the Keystone Mall. And so I was perfect because I was like, well, I can work here. I can find a teacher training. It'll go hand in hand. I can, really do that. And so I was there and I got my 200-hour all people, and I was moving up in the ranks, and I was kind of like, in a lot of places when you're developing, you are hopefully are developing and you can move up the ladder and you're moving around within an organization. And I realized as I was approaching the next rung that the more I went into my time there, if more asks were made of me, right? If I was going to go into an even bigger management position, then the thing I came there for, which now I had my 200 hours, so I was working at the store, I was teaching classes when I could, wasn't really leaving me time to give more to the thing I came there for in the first place. And I was having that realization. And then my father passed away in September of 2013. And my mom and I kind of had some come to, this moment around it. And she went back to India for a while. They were in arranged marriage. So her whole life in the US was based around him being here. That's what brought her here, was having met my father, married him, and then coming to the US. And so she went back to where most of her family was, and back to that for a bit. And she was over there, and I was just realizing this more and more. And we both agreed. She's kind of like, Purvi, I don't really think you're supposed to like be working for other people. My parents were entrepreneurs for for all of my life. And so I put in my notice and I found a 300-hour training. So this would give me my 500 level certification, which was kind of one of the highest tiers of certification you can get in regards to Yoga Alliance crediting. And so I, at that time, so I gave my notice and I went to India, and I went to see family I hadn't seen in 20 years that I was raised with. I got to meet nieces and nephews I'd never seen. And Indian communities are really close. And so my cousins are more like brothers and sisters. And so their kids are more like we don't really, it's hard. And I get lost in the first cousin, second cousin. I think everyone does, but so I think we simplify. They're your blood, and they're your family, your brothers and your sisters. You grew up with them like that. And so, I did that, and I went to an ashram in Kerala, got to like travel by train with my family from northern India, where we're from in Gujarat, all the way down past Goa into Kerala. And then I spent a month doing a 300-hour training. So 10-ish hours a day more for 30 days, because we only had 2 days off. And we lived it and breathed it and studied with I had my yoga teacher was a yoga master. He, they code you by your robes and your coloring, what you can wear. It's kind of in a lot of different stuff, right? You get a certain robe at a certain time or a certain color or garment, whether it's a religious belief system or my son's been taking karate. He just moved up to a gold belt, so he's been really excited about that. And so my teacher was formerly trained in Shivananda, and then we had swamis or gurujis that were these monks that had studied the ancient texts. And so we would have these group discussions and conversations around what they meant and how we're seeing them in this world now, and what they meant back then when those words were created. And and so I got to go do that. It was amazing.
And didn't you tell me it was 10, 12 hours a day?
Yeah. 10, 12 hours a day, 2 practices a day. They were sneaky. They started with like 2-hour practices a day, like 1.5 hour for the second one sometimes. Then they were both eventually like 2.5 hours. And then they were like 3.5 hours by the end of the training, because you added layers, you learn more technique. And so you put it in. And so we'd practice asana for an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. And then we'd practice breath work to clear the body for another 45 minutes. And then we'd sit in meditation for 45 minutes to an hour. And it was over and over. And by the end, we were doing it 3 times a day. And I was like, just like all my muscles were forming. They're just so much strength and compression and structure. But it was a lot of time. It was rigorous, and it was very very, I loved every moment of it. It changed me. It was such a vital part of my life story, my process, my journey, to just be able to go back to the roots of these South Asian, you know, techniques and tools and practices
What a
and stories.
gift. What a gift to
I
go back
know.
to your roots, like you said, and learn ancient practices. I mean, wow, what a gift that would be to anyone, you know?
I know. I wish that for people, and that's the thing, like, that there's so much of that out there for us to be able to go back to our own roots or to find roots or make roots and see what we are. And, you know, all our roots aren't just lovely and beautiful. So we sometimes but to go back to them and see them and engage with them. And especially in this area where I was putting more and more of myself into it. And so, it was a really fortunate opportunity for me, Bill, to do that. And having family there and history there, really made it all that much more special.
So you'd wake up at what, 5 in the morning? I mean, what time?
Yeah, yeah. We wake up at 5. We'd go out, and there'd be these salted water, warm jugs, like metal tins, pots, and we'd fill our little neti pot. I still have it. And then we would neti pot, and then we'd go and we'd have meditation, quiet meditation for 30 minutes, and then we'd meet for tea, and they'd have honey lemon ginger tea. That would be when we could talk, and then we would go and we'd do our first practice, and then after our first practice we would have our meals, but you would have quiet meals. We'd, like, you're supposed to sit and quietly eat your food like a yogic meal, and then we'd have a little break. We'd have theory, a little break, more theory. We'd switch from sutras to Gita. Then we'd go and do another practice. And then we'd all get to go back and we'd go have dinner. And then sometimes we would either have a guest teacher in. We had an Ayurvedic surgeon leading our anatomy and physiology. So that was really cool. And then we had our monk, our swami would teach us bhajans, or the songs and the mantras, and we'd spend some time on some of those, together. But it would be 10-12 hours a day. Well, and then at 9 o'clock I would, like, call my then boyfriend, my now husband, right? And then I'd hang up, and then he'd use a calling card and he'd call me back, and then I'd sit there and I'd talk to him. And so many nights I fell asleep with him just on the phone next to me because I was so tired. You know, this is like 2014, and what we were like, you had to have like SIM cards and do this thing and it was just like I was like, I can't, just lay there, doze off, done.
So I'm wondering what you learned. That seems really transformational. What did you learn?
Uh, how powerful the techniques are, that they've withstood time, but also, my favorite line is like, you don't ever have to do a chaturanga. You don't, like, yoga isn't a chaturanga. Yoga is in that down dog. Yoga is all of it. That's not that it's not those things at all, but you don't have to do a single chaturanga. It was like my favorite excuse to ever walk away from that pose in my life was like, and I did a whole 300-hour, and we didn't do a single chaturanga. So I
But what
like to
about
give.
eagle? Did you do the eagle?
Oh, we did do eagle. We did do eagle. We did it. Goodness, I know. They
So
got me.
describe the eagle. Describe the eagle since you're on
Eagle.
video. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
describe.
yeah. Eagle pose. Well, it's a standing balancing posture, and so
Okay.
one of the posture, what you bind one leg over the other, and then you also wrap your arms together, and so you're
Okay,
standing.
yes.
And it's very, like, compressed, right? And things start to get wobbly, and you're on one foot technically, and you can always prop your toe down. But the trick is you have to, the more you sit in it, the more your leg wraps around it. The more surface space you have, the more contact you have, then you have more support. When we have contact, it's feedback, and then that means we have something to give into. And so it's almost one of those, you have to work on it past the difficulty of wrapping and sitting to really find time to sit in it. And then it takes a lot of effort to be effortless, right? And I think that's a very powerful sentiment that you see, these beautiful postures sometimes put up, and they float their feet up, and there's this whole, like, visual of a handstand practice. And those can be really empowering. They require a lot of focus, but they've required a lot of time and technique and refinement. But they put a lot of effort into that to make it look so effortless. But down dog is a hard one, chaturanga is a hard one. And I'm like, we did a lot of hard poses, but it is so much more than that. And I learned more about the Sanskrit language and how it was really phonetically created to put off a vibrancy. So the words that you speak actually hold the quality energetically of the meaning they put out. And so when you speak them out, that they hold their value, so that every piece of this was very intentionally curated.
Very mindfully created. I mean, the layers are phenomenal. So the intimate question is then, what did you learn about yourself while you were over there?
Oh, I think I was in a very performative place in my life outwardly, and it informed me how much I had my own stuff to work on. And it was nice to see it in my roots because, I think some of the challenges of growing up in the Western culture, having first generation immigrant parents, was really finding the balance of meeting their expectations, though everything around me didn't really support that to its fullest, which is why I think I went back to India so many times. That they were, I was living there for a while. They were, um, but that I could do all the poses on the outside I could want to, but the nuances and the layers were really within myself, and it was going to take I was going to get out of it what I put into it, and I learned how I will easily give way to others, and I think it can be a good thing to be of service, but when we're constantly serving those around us, we forget to take care of ourselves, then we lose a bit of that, which we give.
Say that again.
So I think that when we give and we are not keeping ourselves as relevant and vital in the process of it all, and we give out of ourselves to others, and the world around us, the communities around us, then we lose a little bit of that for ourselves. And what we give, the idea is, if you give from an empty cup, what you give is something hollow. There's nothing in there. There's no material, right? What you give is a hollow give. And those accumulate with time. And the giving might be authentic, and it might be intentionally there with good reason and kindness and this ability to be a part of a bigger picture. But as a parent, I have to create a lot of balance in making sure I take time for myself. And I just booked a trip to New York City with a girlfriend for a few days, and we're just going to go play. And I'm like, I do that. And it's interesting because it's like I need that. And I was doing a lot for the things outside of myself or the world around myself. And I really need to address that for myself within. And yeah, that was a big lesson.
So the self-care, and I'm hearing boundaries.
Yeah.
I during my time, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because during the time when I began my journey into mindfulness, which incorporated yoga, boundaries were a huge theme for me, because I love that visual of giving from a place of being hollow. That's going to stick with me. So I thank you for that, because as I learned about boundaries and the book Boundaries, it should be required reading for all adults. I don't care who you are, where you live. It is one of the most profound things I've ever read. And so I realized, though, that by recognizing, being mindful that I was empty, and when someone would ask something of me, sometimes I could give from a place of already having filled my cup. I had been to yin yoga. I had been on a long walk that day, and I felt refreshed and vibrant and ready to give. But there were days when I didn't have time for that. And I knew that by saying yes, on the tail end of that yes was resentment. And so that became my litmus test for giving is, will I feel resentful if I say yes? And I think when I would say, yep, I think I will, that meant that I had a hollow cup. And it was the best thing for me and the person asking to say no. And boundaries are huge. And we learn a little bit more of the boundaries, even of our body, of our flesh, when we perform yoga. That's what I found, is becoming more in tune of where I end. That's boundaries again, where I end and where other people or the world around me begins. And I am in it, I'm connected to it, but we are not of one flesh. There's kind of a stopping point where I am in control of myself. So much.
Yeah. Well, it is, I almost said it too. It's like we can be resentful, and that is a hard, we're allowed, our feelings are very valid. And I say it to my students all the time. I'm like, your feelings are valid. And sometimes the question is, are they based in reality? Right. And I say that more like in a visual sense, because I'm like, you feel like your knee is over your heel, but if you look down, it's not over your heel. Then what you feel and what is real we're distinguishing them now, right? And I think we realize that what we can give, it's going to cost us something. And even if we want to be able to do it, it's like that resentment's going to add up. It accumulates within us, and then that calcified like hardness, I find that's the thing that we have to challenge ourselves over, and we're making more work for ourselves. So boundaries are really important, and then holding others to it. It's typically, sometimes we think like, oh, I don't know how to hold my own boundary, but it's like it's actually meeting others' discomfort with your boundary. That is our work most often. And people don't like us having boundaries at times, like that, like when it changes, they're like, wait, but I was able to do this. And you're like, no, I had a learning, right? And my learning is this. And so I've put a hard stop here. And and it's like us holding our line, but also like navigating how to handle others' discomfort, and kind of reminding that it's not our work to be done. Um, we can give them our whys, and then they can either like understand and meet them, or take the time to eventually get there.
This was a nice little treasure that we came across. I didn't even expect us to talk about boundaries, but it's
Yeah, I
central
know.
to a lot of the work, in my opinion. It definitely is. Remind us of your definition of mindfulness, because that's going to lead us into our next part of the discussion.
Yeah, I've really come to this intentional attention, right? When we arrive with our like this desire is like the seed for intention. I think it's like you must seek something out or call it to you for us to intend to do something. And so when we intend to do something and we give it our attention, so this very intended upon arrival to something, that is mind, you've put your mind into it, you've put you into it. It's a full mind and fully you ness that really comes together.
So, how is yoga mindful?
Oh, you know, yoga is the slow process of seeing ourselves right where we are. That when we make the postures or the breath work, we utilize them, we try to be with them in that moment. And the habit's going to be, you're going to think about, you know, what your lunch plans are, or the task you left at your desk, and you're going to have to come back to the pose. And that when you're falling out of the pose is probably when you left your body and your mind went somewhere else, or you missed the cue the teacher gave because you were in your own thing about it. And that it is a real ask of us to be with ourselves. And I predominantly teach this Katona style, which really asks us to embody ourselves. So if our body is our home, it's where we reside, it houses our reality. Then how do we arrive within ourselves, and host ourselves in each moment, and use that information, that mindfulness attention to ourselves, to see where we go a lot, where we don't go maybe often, or like what trips us up. Um, my teacher often says it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it that gets you. It's like I was skiing recently, and it was not skiing that I got hurt, even though I fell on the skis. It was my habit of looking too far out, trying to anticipate too far out into the future. That when I wasn't on my feet on my skis as a novice in the Rockies, I was falling over the things overhead, right? Or I was like worried about the bumps in the snow that were coming instead of just the feet and the skis underneath me. And my habit was to go out into the future. I'm a parent. I'm always looking out to like what's next, what's our day hold, looking further out. And that mindfulness, that yoga practice really reminds me to keep coming back to me right here, and it's the refinement of that capacity to do it on my mat over and over, to do it in my breath techniques, to do it with my attention, to put my mind in it and my body in it, so I can take it when I, am running late to do drop off or pick up or whatever. And
So
the
you're
urgency slides in,
yes. So you're saying that as a 5,000 hour plus teacher, you're still thinking about that New York trip while you're holding that blasted eagle pose. I mean, it happens
Ah,
to the best of us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm gonna let you in. It's usually food I'm thinking about.
Which one? What's the
You
one
know,
that comes back?
Oh, it's always a guacamole. I like love it, like a good, I'm like, are we gonna do I crave, I love a good like mezcal margarita, and I'm like, go out, are we gonna go have a drink and have a bite? Are we gonna have a guacamole and tacos? We are big La Piedad people here in our house. We took our son when he was 5 days old. Like that he sat in his little chair and we like had our, first meal out as a family. So it's my habit. It's like where it's where we go. And so I'm always like, what are we gonna eat after this? I've done a
That's
lot of yoga. I'm gonna be hungry. And I'm in that, oh, off to the future I go, which is my habit.
yeah, it's who we are. I mean, our minds think. So I'm wondering how mindfulness has impacted your
Uh,
own life. Maybe as a parent, as a spouse, as a teacher, human.
I hope it has made me more generous and more patient. I think it gives me, it's taught me to work through the discomfort, that the journey is not around an obstacle, it's through it. And so we're figuring it out, and that sometimes things will feel good and gooey, and those are great. But even in the yoga beliefs, they're like things we seek that we like eventually bring us grief because they end, because all things that begin eventually end. And so, are we causing ourselves harm, or what? I was listening to Atlas of the Heart and Brene Brown's, she was talking about this quality of bittersweet, to hold two happy and sad at the same time. um and it is this ability for us to do that, and I think it leaves me more room to find joy in the bittersweets, because it's usually bitter. There's something about it, right? My kid's about to finish kindergarten next week, and I'm like terrified about all this time we're going to be spending together. Like, how am I going to occupy two children every day, of the week for 8 weeks? And also, like, he's growing, and I look at pictures around my desk of him in his, it's like it's bittersweet. There's this joy for him and that how much he's grown, but it's like to really manage those and celebrate those in life, and that it's
Mm.
always going to be this and that. It's never just one thing. And that if it is, things that might bring me joy could maybe bring others sorrow, and so we have to, or vice versa. And so, but there's got to be room for all of it, and the best thing I can do is handle myself in the moment. And it helps me teach my kids that I can really try to slow them down. It's like really slow down together. And patience as a parent is really, I have a 2-year old, she'll be 3 in July, and a just turned 6-year old. And we are in the thick of it.
Yes. You said 3 and 6. Yeah, my
Yep.
kids are 3 years apart, so I have been in that exact same place, and there's just so much energy that it's not quite fair, you know? I mean, it's stacked in their favor. There's just no way around.
It's so biased. I mean, I'm like, how there's two of them, there's one of me. They're in different seasons, but they're like all alert. And I'm like, mommy just wants to read a book in the sun, like maybe sit outside quietly. And like, I don't know,
Mm.
do we have to make this much noise? Or can we like, it takes them so much discomfort to eventually get to the place where they're playing together well. And it's like me trying to be patient to get to that point. It's like they're hitting each other with the bats and the balls. And then eventually they're both hitting the ball and the bat properly and they're playing together. But that first bit is like the hard bit. That's my yoga bit.
So I'm wondering about your own routine. Do you have any particular routines that are mindful? Maybe it's in the morning. Maybe that doesn't happen in the morning because there's a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old running around. What, tell me about your routine. What sticks with you?
Well, I'm a data person, so I love information. I'm a learner, a life learner. So I had read about how much we dehydrate in a lot of the Indian cultures too, with like you drink your warm water in the morning. And so first thing I do is I drink a full thing of room temperature water.
About 16
And
ounces. What is that?
that's 16
16?
ounces,
All
12
right.
to 16 ounces. Yeah. And I will just take it down like I sometimes 2 cups. And then I do I was doing morning pages, which I think we talked briefly about The Artist's Way and Julia Cameron's book. And the 3 pages, I have so many notebooks full. But then this season of my life, it was taking me too long to get that done and what the kids needed in the morning. And so I've gone to a website. It's called 750 Words. I think that they have a new platform. So it's new.750words.com. And they measured out that each page is roughly 250 words. And so you try to get 750 words out, and I can get it done in 8 to 10 to 12 minutes versus 30-ish minutes of like handwritten, 35, sometimes 40, and
I do know.
often pause. Like I can do this and I can stay with it and I can get it and I can really get that conscious stream of writing done. And so that's my morning ritual. And I make my bed. I'm a bed maker. I want my bed made. So when I come back to it later, she's very loving and nurturing. And it's the ritual of that. My end of week practice on Sundays, we put 3 things we're grateful for into what we call our gratitude jar. My friend Shannon, my bestest, my little soul sister of a person, had um, introduced me to this idea. And on the first of the year, we always open up our jar and look back at the year of things we've been grateful for. And then we keep a handful and we put the year on it and we put them back in the jar. And so every year we have some from 2015 and 2016 and 2017. And so those get to come back up as well. And they're, some of them are bittersweet. I had a dog for 12 years. She like, I was always still grateful for, so it's like, there's these things. But that one's, we've been doing that for almost 10 years, and it is a really special way. And we now are, slowly involving Beckett and writing his out. And as he's learning to write, we imagine he'll write his own in. We kind of have to look at him for a bit. Kids spelling words is like the funniest thing in kindergarten, like when they're first phonetically trying to sound out and how they spell it out. And so, but that's a ritual we have weekly and annually. And my practice is mostly breath work and either writing, or I do some simple like movements. I tend to have shoulder, neck stuff that I like to work on. Just it's my habit to carry kind of my effort here. So I'll do a lot of wrist work and shoulder work to counter life stuff,
Heck.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to set myself up for a little more success, because by the end of the day, and I'm so tired, I'm like in my bed, like watching whatever show on the couch. I've like slumped in with the couch, kids cuddling, and my butt's tucked under, my shoulders are rounded. I'm like turning into a little ball. And so it gives me vibrancy, the breath practices. So those are a bit of my routines. And I find that you don't need as much. Sometimes we put more pressure on sticking with it. Sometimes it's good to try something new. And so the typing has been a new thing, but I've really found it gives me a feeling of like accomplishment to self and attention to the things that my mind is coming to. And then also, I found a way to do it more efficiently in this season of my life.
Love that. Well, and that's really the heart of yoga, I feel like, is you adapt. You adapt in the moment, in a season. And so you're doing that. That's beautiful. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'm wondering if you would describe to me and our guests or our audience the difference between Indian yoga or practicing yoga in India and North American yoga.
Yeah, I find these a lot of these Eastern styles, right? I find there are closed systems, like they're a certain way, we do it a certain order, we have it, but there's an end goal in mind. That is a little bit, I think, more like wholly integrated, right? We do the postures so we can breathe well. We breathe well so we move the prana well. We move the prana well so when it's harmonized, we can sit and meditate. And and I'm going to be the first to say it. Why did I end up in a hot yoga? It's because I was like, I need to do something mindful, or I want to move. I want to sweat. I want to get a workout, and I want to get it done. I want to feel accomplished because there is something to that. I do think there's like a difference in what we're looking for in accomplishments, and not to say that's a bad thing. I think we just we're in different cultures and customs and approaches to it. And there was that rigor and commitment and time, but it's like, I don't have 3.5 hours for a practice. There's a more like structure to their order and why they do it that way, and that discipline. I think in the West we have a little more forgiveness and leniency, but that also goes into more like performative and on the outside and exterior based. And there's got to be room for all of it, but I do think that there are those differences. And in India they don't use blocks where I was training. It was so funny. Not, and BKS Iyengar, he did bring in props eventually, but it was like, you get to your toes by straightening your legs, and eventually your hands will get to the floor, right? Or it's like you work on the bind pose, but you just don't do the bind, and eventually you get your hands to your feet by doing the other poses. And it's like a mermaid pose where you're like in a back bend and you're on your in pigeon, and then you're like in the end it's sleeping swan, right? But it's like very out there. It's a big pose. And I like to bend my knees. I like to bend my knees in everything. And so permission on the West has been more generous to me and my body. I think we have to adapt from the Eastern way, but there was like a method to the madness there. And the method was there so we could be with ourselves. And that sitting and being with ourselves was really that vital piece of it. And the texts really talk, the Yoga Sutras is one of the books that they reference. And it only mentions one pose, and it is the sit pose. It is to sit and be with ourselves pose. And so the rest of it's just an aim to help us get there. And here it's like we're getting our workout in. We're getting it's not, and it's so much more than that too, but it's like a box checked. We do it like in an hour, we get it done for the day, and we feel like we've accomplished a thing. And it is, and it can be really, for me, an hour-long practice is really empowering, but it took me a long time to get there. It took me a lot of different techniques and trainings and visits and workshops to really find that for myself. So,
Do you feel like in an hour you can get through enough or similar poses to reach at least kind of a shade of what India is shooting for? Is that even possible, or it's like, no, you really need to do the 3-hour thing? No compromises.
no, I think we can. And the interesting thing is, I like a 90-minute practice because I like breath work and I like to give it its own time. But in an hour, you can do it. And I teach a Katona class once a week for an hour, and we get there. And I think the point is discern, like, why meditate? And it's like to discern well, to sit well, to be well, to find contentment so you can discern how you're attaching to something and how it makes you feel. And that, are those feelings based in reality? What is valid and what is necessary? And is it even being helpful? And I think in an hour-long class, you can hit those points. You can hit ways to kind of take those concepts on, embody them, explore them within yourself, explore your body, your reactions within it. And find habits there with time and time and time. An hour a day, an hour, each time you're putting it in adds up to a lot of hours of time with yourself. And that's, I think that it adds up whatever way. I think it's a little unrealistic to have 3.5 hours. I don't, maybe I'll look forward to a season of my life when that's possible, but I may be done with, I may not be interested in a 3.5 hour practice, but I'm not interested actually in a 3.5 hour practice. So, it's, can we leave room for all of it and maybe make it more whole? I think that would be bridging that gap, right? Where we might be so focused on poses. Can we remember to invite other things in and do that within an hour? I think we can,
I want you to talk a little bit about the type of yoga that you've mentioned several times, Katona. It's a newer form. So it sounds like you are evolving yoga or helping with that process of evolving yoga. Tell us, what is Katona and what drew you to it too?
Oh, so I was taking a trip to New York. So disclosure, favorite city in the world. Go there. It's like my favorite place to go, at least once a year. And I was visiting, and a teacher of mine who was recently moved to Indianapolis from New York, I was like, hey, do you have any recommendations? And he said, oh, you should check out this place. And the style of yoga they teach is called Katona, and it is geographically named. Naveen Maiken and who really founded it, Abby Galvin, are really they've been spearheading this style of yoga in the East Coast for 35, 40 years. But in the sense of yoga, that's really the new kid on the block, right? It's still very new to the table. And it integrates hatha yoga and naturalism, these Chinese medicine and Taoist philosophies, ideas, breath work, practice. Really, it uses a lot of formal technique to inform us. It's a longevity practice, and so I like that about it, that I can do it over and over, and I don't have flare-ups in my body. I don't have injury, but it's saying, how do you work the mind? You work through the body because it's our most tangible resource. And how do you work the body? You use the mind. The body has an explicit capacity. Here's my hands. My hand stops here, right? My joints stop here. Like, this is me. It's explicit, but the mind is limitless. It's expansive and implicit, that there is so much potential within the mind. And so we can integrate mindfulness and using our mind in a capacious way that we can really captivate that in our body. And we use a lot of techniques like measure that bones are structure, and they give us structure, right? They're the form of our body. And so we use measure for stacking our bones well and ourselves well, so we can use our joints well, creating strong angles that last through time, and really putting time into that stuff. And it is, so I found it in New York, and then I found a teacher in Columbus, and I did a workshop there, and I went
Here
back
in
and did it
Indiana.
in, yeah,
Columbus.
well, oh no, Columbus, Ohio, actually.
Okay.
Sorry. I know we're so close. I do forget about that sometimes. So Columbus, Ohio. And then I went to New York and trained. And then with the pandemic, I actually, because I didn't even think I would get my 200-hour in Katona. It was just seemed a little unrealistic. I would have to go to a West Coast or an East Coast, or um, when Josie was still in Columbus there, but she moved to Denver. So now I was back to the West. It was like, well, how do you do that? And with the pandemic, I actually got so much more access, and I found even more teachers that don't live in the US, teachers that are all over the globe leading these things. And you have to have a 200-hour to get certified, but you independently acquire 200 hours of training, and then you reach your certification. And so since 2019, I've been accumulating hours, but I really put my head into it after a trip to Greece in 2021 for a retreat where we did Katona twice a day. The whole week, and I didn't have any flare-ups. I didn't have any injuries, and I walked away really feeling clear and grounded. And so it is what I predominantly practice, and I love to teach it, but all my vinyasa classes have a bit of my Katona theory. Not, it's, but like my approach to their theory and their ideas takes a lot of effort to be effortless, and that how you do anything is how you do everything. And when does our place of mastery, this is when this came to me, was how do the things we master our mastery eventually causes misery. Like, when do our strengths become our weaknesses is one of the ways they say it. It's like we do something so many ways, eventually we either break it down or we become so stuck in it that we forget to see other angles, and it leaves us out of another bit of information. And um, our body is a tool for insight. It's a personal practice. And so I could go on and on and on. I sorry, tangent on it.
That's wonderful. What stuck out to me was this longevity piece. So this means, does that mean that we would be building our bodies stronger as a way to live longer? Is that what you mean by that?
Well, I think it's like, what's the formula for joy, right? And it's like to live a long, happy, healthy life. Well, that means you want to have a body that can keep up with a healthy mind, and you want a mind that can keep up with a healthy body, because there's nothing more tragic than to have a functioning body and a dysfunctional mind, or like when your mind deteriorates, right? Like when we're learning through science that we can do certain things and it helps us and our neurology and our plasticity overcome other potential diseases or down the way, right? And then that the body can be used to really fine tune and to do well. And that when we're working our joints and we're working our body, we're working its energetics. We're also working the organs that have jobs, right? Your liver is a filter. It needs to, you can't live without a liver. You our kidneys are sponges. What's like, what do we secrete? What do we keep on? What do we let go of? What do we let release? And it's like, how are we doing it for our body so we have a healthy body and a healthy mind, and we can find joy for it over a longer period of time.
I like that. I like that. It seems like that would be maybe a good practice for beginners. I mean, you're trying to create the structure. Would you recommend that as for beginners?
Yeah, I mean, I think, most people are going to find it later because the teacher has found, I mean, the studio I go to in Manhattan, their tagline is like the place your teacher goes to practice. And it's like most of us found it later after much time, but some people found it earlier because they were right by it and it just happened to be what they found. So I think there's room for all of it. And um, I think that's been the lovely thing about incorporating components of it and ideas of it in a vinyasa class, because that's the general means, right? That's what we're going to typically find are these hatha vinyasa classes, but then you can layer it and build to it. But, I also think that sometimes people don't come in with bad habits if they're new. So you don't have to persuade them that there might be this way to take a look at it. It's like, I'm like, always like, bend your knees in down dog. And all people want to do is straighten your legs. And I'm like, great, then straighten your legs. It's like, there's got to be room for all of it. So,
That's
and
right.
it's the fun part about it. Yeah.
What sorts of tips do you have for beginners to yoga?
Oh, you know, it's not about the pose. I think it's really a very interesting thing. I think that we get really hung up on doing the poses right. And it's more about the process you have, the stories you tell yourself along the way. And then, like, what are the stories you're going to tell yourself? And if you say you can't do things, I can't touch my toes, then why would you ever get to touch your toes? Right. It's like our
Right.
narrative, and be patient with it, that it is even in the books they tell you this is a practice that requires repetitive attention. It's a practice. They use words that say, you do it vairagya, to come to it with discipline over and over and over again. That over and over again will look different with time, but that also, it is that, like, keep coming back to it. And enlightenment might not be what we find, but the grace that we find when we meet ourselves where we are and are like, oh, I drifted off, like, oh, there's that habit, is, I think that's the lesson we're walking away with. And so you can do it in any style of practice, and you could do it at any level, both find it and deepen it, your practice.
A word that keeps coming to me as we speak today is discipline. You seem like a very disciplined person and a big proponent of discipline. That seems to be at the heart of the yoga practice for you. Do you see it that
That's
way?
so
I
funny you
see it
say
from the
that.
outside. So I'm curious if you see it.
It's so funny. I'm I am a formulator and a planner and a strategist. I like to analyze and overview, and I feel like I have I have areas of discipline, probably not where I could use them the most, or, it's like, do as I say, not as I do. My practice, it lacks because I spend a lot of time between parenting and teaching and really working, and Monumental Yoga we have coming up, and being on this board. It's like I'm volunteering my time, and I'm contracting in time, and I'm paying, I'm working, and it's like the first thing that slips is my yoga practice, but I also know my yoga practice is the thing that sustains me. And I've had to really shift how I look at it with time. And my avenue in was body and hour-long practices. And now it's more like 15 minutes of breath work and seated work and calling it a day, because I know that that's about what I can do. But it's impressive what I can do in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, leaving grace for that. Um, yeah, I hope that answered the question. I feel
It
like I don't.
did. I would just say from the outside in, that seems to be kind of bubbling beneath the surface. So I have a lot of respect for the discipline it's taken you to get to this point. So I know we can beat ourselves up quite a bit, but I just wanted to say that it's a lot that you've committed to the practice, and I'm sure it has blessed thousands of people because you've put in thousands of hours. So
Well, for
yeah,
myself, it's taught me a lot. The more I do it, the more it teaches me. And then I suppose I have more to share.
yeah, yeah.
And people take what they can. Yeah.
The other word that has come up as we've had previous interactions has been inclusivity. Tell me what that means to you as it relates to yoga and why it's so important to you.
Well, I think, we are, if we're even looking at yoga as a seed of it, and it's this idea that we yoke together, we bring together, we come together, then that means there's no alone, that it's always this and that. So it's always all of us, and we're more potent together. There was a study done, where they measure the capacity of the heart, that when the heart is actually, you are with more people, your heart can work better and less. It works harder when it's on its own, but it works more efficiently and with less effort when we're in a community. So we are communal beings, and we are really meant to collaborate and coexist. Um, and that I think that it is, I don't know. I think that inclusivity is our avenue in, that we want people to feel welcome and safe, and able, no matter their body type, disability, ability, means, access, that they can find these things and have them for themselves. And it doesn't, you don't have to stand on your hands for it to be yoga, or you don't have to progress that way. It could be for your mind and your breath. And I think that there's really an important, when we can include people in on this and they can find their own possibility and potential and really sit with themselves as these beings capable of getting on the other side of an obstacle, that we are empowering them, and that it shouldn't be limited to a certain audience based on what they look like and what they can afford and where they live and how much education they have, or what disabilities they're working with. And I think it's very important, um, that we try to really widen that net of how people are seeing yoga as a means of being accessible, and everything. I think that life could be more inclusive.
Yeah. Well, I uh, I know in our discussion you talked about being a I do want you to lead us in a practice. So we'll come back to that in just a moment because I'm really interested to see which one you lead us in. Um, in our discussion, you had talked about being an ambassador for Lululemon. And so while we're on this topic of inclusivity, let's talk about that and how that kind of came together. I know in the past Lululemon had had some challenges with inclusivity. We spoke about that honestly, openly, frankly. And so when we started talking about inclusivity and that you were a Lululemon um, ambassador, I was really curious about that. So what does it mean to be an ambassador for Lululemon, and what has changed in Lululemon, and what what things have they done to
I feel like
change?
they are, there, is great responsibility that comes with great power, right? And they're a bigger organization. And I think they really saw themselves as like, if we're originally based around like mindfulness, or we've integrated mindfulness ideas into the way we build our teams and how we exist in communities and how we build our stores and our brand and our product, and it's very intentionally curated, that some of these pieces take 10 years to make, right? They just came out with shoes, and it's like they've been working on them for over a decade. And certain styles and cuts might take years to come out into the real world tangible place where we get to buy them as a product. That they're doing that in some areas, but there was lack in other areas. And then you have a pandemic, you have the George Floyd incident, and then you have our awareness. People can't go off to brunch and forget about these atrocities that are happening in our systems. And they're sitting at it and they're looking at it face on now. And so when all those things happen and the Black Lives Matter movements was rising and there were protests, they went ahead and put money in it, put support into it, created an organization and a whole body that went on to work on specifically. IDEA is the acronym: inclusivity, diversity, equity, and this ability that we can they could invest in their people. And how they did that was, they took ambassadors from around the globe and they interviewed, and I put myself as a candidate up for that because I felt like I both worked for the company before when we had some problems as well, and then also had really, seen them pivot and try to attempt some things and do some things well. And they are we're not going to expect them to get it perfect. And I don't think any organization is. You look to leaders in any area, they have been through a lot of hardships, whether it's Archbishop Desmond Tutu or the Dalai Lama. They went through some real atrocities, but they still find compassion. They say we've come a long way, and that sadly change does take a long time. It's a slow build up. It blows our minds because we're in an age of urgency and immediate gratification, but like they put their dollars where they went. They expanded their sizing, right? I think it took a lot of my observation would be like, it probably took a lot of marketing and research and a lot of feedback to figure out how to make that look right. And then,
So tell us
but
about
they
that.
are
So
making
what did it used to be and what is it now? The sizing.
I don't know their exact sizing, but they used to their size 2, right? But I think their sizing is like an extra small to like an extra large is technically it. But the numbers don't depict that. So people don't really get that. And you have to be able to walk into a store and go, I might be willing to put $100 into these pants. And their numbers don't even make it sense to me. And it doesn't look like it includes me. And I think there was a lot of gap in that. But then there was a need for more sizes. Our body types we're not limited to this certain small means. And so what's projected out into the world around us or told around us, and we're not supposed to necessarily fit those boxes either. And so I think including more size runs and styles and sizes. And so now I think they go 16, 18. So they've added 3, 4 more sizes, and they go down a bit as well. And I think they really have made cuts and styles that are more inclusive. And I think you look at a newsletter or their website, and the bodies don't look like one specific type of body. They're really trying to expand, like this is for everyone. And they invest in their teams a lot, and they invest in improving themselves a lot. They have their own development programs. But I saw them when the pandemic hit, and a lot of the ambassadors run wellness businesses take part of their profits and say, we're going to put this through a fund so these organizations can apply and get some funding to help them keep them afloat during a very hard time for an industry that took a big hit. And all at the same time donating to organizations that were struggling, that were out there doing the work for advocacy and inclusion. And they've been real proponents for the LGBTQIA plus community. And I think that they're really standing with people. And I think they're trying. I think they're trying, and I appreciate that more than anything.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing with us that journey and what they have committed to and what they are doing. I'm wondering if at this moment, if you could tell us one of your favorite practices or favorite poses potentially, and maybe lead us through that, or it could be a breath work. I'm not sure what you've chosen. So this is a little bit of what's behind door 3 for us.
Great. Okay, so I wanted to take us to what is called it's the golden thread meditation is what it's sometimes referenced to. It is I'm sorry, I'm gonna probably do not disturb just to make sure for a little longer. The idea in Katona that our body is a house. We are residing, this is our abode. Our house has 3 floors. Each floor has 3 rooms. So it's a 9 grid room. Okay. And the golden thread meditation kind of takes us through each room of our house, its archetypes, what qualities it holds, um, and it takes us through our house. And I thought I'd take us through our house a little slower with the archetypes at first while we're breathing and kind of building, and then take us through a little bit faster. And what's neat is each room has a number. So it's like sometimes a number lands to you, or sometimes when we're there and we revisit and revisit, we're like, I actually don't feel anything in that part of my body. Or like, oh, I really feel something over here. And it gives us time to attend, but it gives us access to our whole body. So I thought I'd take us through the golden thread meditation and the metaphor of the body as a house. And you could do it seated, you could do it standing, you could do it driving. So that's a really nice thing about it is listeners can kind of take this on wherever they are. So if we're ready, I suggest, like, if you can stand, or if you're seated, really sit, get your feet on the ground. And if it feels safe and you're available, you're not driving, close your eyes so you can really take it on. And then just notice how you breathe as you sit. What's the cadence? Where's the sensation? Is one lung fill up a bit more than the other? Is it the lower chambers, the upper chambers? Notice that you have a left side. It's typically the lunar in nature, the feminine, the receptive. Then you've got the right side. It's solar, it's yang, it's the masculine in nature, the trajectory. And then us in the middle of it, where it's unified, is this third nature, us engendered, that we are neither and both. Take a moment, lick your lips, swallow. Shift a little bit left to right in your hips. And then stop in the middle, shift a little. If you could tuck and tilt your tailbone and find the middle. And then the idea is the imagery of feeling your left foot, your left hip within its support. So if you're standing, your foot's on the ground, really feel your left foot plant, find your left knee, find your left hip, and then do the same on the right, your right foot, your right knee, your right hip. And then imagine you have a third foot, your perineum, which is between the pubis and the coccyx, plugging in like a third foot, your implicit imaginary third foot, your trinity, your triangle, your strong prong, plugging into the earth so you can root in. And as you plug in beneath you, find rise out of the top of you. Notice around your left eye, your eyeball fits its socket, your right eye, your eyeball fits its socket. And this third eye between the eyes and the forehead, this third eye. So this capacity to look out into the world, cross reference, and then look in and inform ourselves. Then you have your left hand, your left shoulder, your right hand, your right shoulder, and the imaginary third hand, the proverbial button and buttonhole coming together. So these are our 3 rooms, our 3 floors. I want you to imagine the soft, fleshy part at the top of your head, a drop of the universal golden thread that is containing, drops in from the crown of your head, and it falls all the way down. Swallow. Imagine you following that saliva as it hits the belly button. Imagine it dropping down one to your boiler room, that third foot, the perineum, plugging downward into the ground. This is where we turn the fire in our house. We have our circuitry, our sex organs, our electricity, the things that turn us on. It's our fire, it's our heat. That nature polarity, fire is effort. It is rising. I describe, but you got to heat your house so you can live within it. You have heating and cooling. So we ground our circuits, we light a match, we strike a fire, we have our boiler room, and then fire rises and we rise up to our right eye. And I want you to go to the back of your right eye. And this is what is behind us is our history, our ancestry. So room 2 is our attic. It's where we keep the things that have been handed down to us in time, our treasures. We want to keep them away from flooding when water descends. We want to keep them the furthest away from the fire. God forbid our house catches on fire. We keep it up, we store it. That's what's been handed down over time. And we go behind ourselves through our history, through time, to our left shoulder, our left hand. This is our kitchen. It's the side of our heart. It's how we handle our feelings. It is us. Who do we break bread with? What are the conversations we have in our kitchen? How do we feel ourselves in the world, our internal lunar landscape, our feelings of ourselves? And then from 3, we go up. We rise up to our left eye, to the front of it, where we look out into the world. It's our bedroom. It's where this day begins. We dream and envision our goals, and then we open the curtains and we look out to the world, and we turn slightly that left eye towards 2 o'clock. Imagine if you're on a clock face, visioning out to 2, that there's so much potential out there. Then 5, you go diagonally down the steps in your house to your center, your heart space, the room of your own, room 5. It's the middle of it all, has access to every room in your house. It is the most implicit version of ourselves, that this is where we light our candle, put on our vinyl, take out our journal, and spend some time doing us, putting ourselves in the mix of it. And you keep following that diagonal line down to your right hip, your right knee, your right foot. This is your garage. It's how you step out into the world. It's where you put yourself out there. You accelerate. You put the pedal to the metal. You start to initiate yourself in the world around you. And from your garage, you climb up as you take initiation. You go up into your office, your library, where you keep your calendar, your pens, your papers. You sign your contracts. In the world, you shake with your right hand. You say, "This is who I am." You out, you put yourself in it, and you formalize it. You put it on your calendar. You say, "I'm going to be here at this time and this day, and that is my capacity." You go back and behind yourself from room 7 to room 8, which is actually your left hip, your left knee, your left foot, because it's your laundry room. It is this idea that there is also us in time showing up to those appointments, us in time showing up, that we can start to really trust ourselves, build ourselves. And then in time, the truth comes out, that it comes out in the wash. You have to spend time on something to learn your techniques. And it's also that when you do laundry, that you accumulate laundry. It is the shit that grounds you down as life propels you in all directions. It's the anchor that brings us back. And then finally, room 9, we climb up to our third eye, our forehead center. This is us, our upper deck patio, where we step out and look out and see our entire landscape. We see our white picket fence, if you have one, or your backyard and your whole terrain that you, and then you take a big breath in. This is all of you, all of your rooms, all of your floors. You 10 is 1 in the next dimension. Exhale, drop down to room 1, your boiler room, the center, a third foot, your pelvis, perineum. Room 2, you climb up to your attic. You see your history. You go back in time into your left arm, and you go into your kitchen and you see how you feel about it. And then 4, you climb up to your bedroom and you dream and envision about it, what you feel and how you want to see it. And 5, you come to the center of yourself, around the heart, the middle, and say, "This is me in it. This is how I approach it. This is my version of it." You step out into the world as you go into your right foot, and you take the risks and you put the effort out there. You climb up room 7 to your right arm and you say, "I'm shaking and making deals. I'm going to sign the contract. I'm going to do what I say and say as I do." You go back and you really behind yourself in time, and you do it over and over and over again. You land in your laundry room, you do it over and over. All the things that keep us, remind us that there is so much to exist in our own personal domesticity, to be our householders, to be human in this life and rise up. 9, we've achieved it. Come up to that third eye. You, as all of you, inhale, breathe it in, take it all in, and exhale, let it go, make a little sound, speak up for yourself. Again, inhale from your perineum to the crown, and then HA, let it go. Take a scan, see how you feel. Notice any numbers, any sensations, any lack thereof. See if you can arrive with your observations without judgment. with discernment, you decide what to keep, what to let go, and then you blink the eyes open.
Thank you for that. We've not had that before. I've honestly never heard of it before. I love that.
Yay! It's a personal favorite, and it's a part of the Katona techniques, but I've been using it for years, and body mapping for vinyasa class, just helping people find themselves, whether it's in a seated posture, on their back, standing. Yeah.
I'm going to go back and listen to it again later so I can focus even more now that I have kind of the lay of the land. Feel free to do that for our listeners too. We are going to go through the glowy daily reflection practice, which is in my book, The Chaos Antidote, a fable about mindfulness, and the companion workbook. You know that G stands for grateful. So why don't you tell us what you're grateful for?
I'm grateful for yoga. I'm grateful for it all of the time, every single day of my life.
Excellent. What about lift up? What is something in your life that you or someone else may need resources for?
Well, I'm going to plug in our Indy yoga movement because we are looking for more resources, more teachers, more support to really expand. We're moving into the Muncie Community School District this year, and so we want to go beyond Central Indiana. We want to support everywhere, and that inclusivity factor of really taking yoga into schools, not asking them to come somewhere separate, is a really special way to make it accessible. So to take it to them where they're already going to be, and other organizations as such that are really helping our youth advocate and find their resiliency.
What about observe? What is something that you notice inside or around you?
Uh, it is a it has been such a joy today to speak about things that really light me up. Even as I like hear my dogs barking in the backyard, I'm like working the dissonance, but it's I'm still very grounded and feel very grateful at this time.
What is your wholesome intention, the W of glowy?
Ooh, to go out today and really make it a great day. Gonna just take perspective into the day, and it's a Friday. I'm gonna celebrate it. I'm gonna make it a pool party kind of a day.
All right. And the last one is my favorite. It's the you are. Sometimes I even hug myself a little bit as I say it. You get to say, Purvi, you are. And this is the positive affirmation to send yourself out into the day. Celebrate your awesomeness.
You are wholesome. I feel very whole and full right now, and I'm gonna keep reminding myself that even in pickup line later.
Um, I want to wrap us up here with you having the opportunity to tell us about Monumental Yoga that's coming up very soon. What is it? Where is it? Who's putting it on? Give us the details. How do we take part in that?
Right. Well, it's our 10th year, Monumental Yoga, 10 years of Monumental Yoga. So we're really excited. It takes place on the solstice. And so it's June 21st. It's going to be in the afternoon, evening, 4:30 to 9, and we'll be in the circle. There's going to be a community class, so all levels, very inclusive, 7:30 p.m. And you come and we practice as a community together. We've really been doing this for a long time. We've had thousands of people show up over the years and participate. We have vendors and a village, and so all are welcome. There'll be a family class earlier, so it's about 30 minutes, so parents and kids can participate together. And then you've got the group class. You could be brand new, never done it. It's a lot of times where they're like, my first class was actually Monumental. I came with a friend. And that's the thing where like, bring your people. We're collecting donations. We'll have merchandise that's put on by Indy Yoga Movement. We are a nonprofit that brings school yoga organizations during school days, after school, repetitive exposure to yoga and mindfulness practices so kids can build resiliency, develop grit, ability to manage emotional regulation, that they can really be empowered in their lives to overcome the obstacles they face. And so it allows us, all the funding that we receive and just the exposure through these events really gives us, more reach. And we are a nonprofit, so it is by means of dollars and the generosity of people that we get to go out there and offer classes, especially to places that maybe can't afford them. And then, Yeah. So that's June 21st. It's a Wednesday, I'm pretty certain. And it is coming up. So we're so excited. And we hope the whole community will come out and celebrate all studios. It's not about, where you practice, what you practice is for everyone. This really is for everyone.
I love that. And tell us where we find out more about that. Do we need to register?
It would be great. That would be helpful. MonumentalYoga.com. We have a website there. Studios, if you're interested in sponsorships, we have a bunch of tiers for that. We have vendors that can sign up, volunteers that can sign up. You can register for the event just so you can sign the waiver. You get a little sense of it. You'll get email. We're on social media. We have Monumental Yoga Indy on Instagram, and then we're on Facebook, and then indyyoga.org is our organizational website. And you can always find, they're kind of interlinked right now as we're building the momentum for Monumental. But
it's wonderful. And that is on the Circle in downtown Indianapolis. So you shut it down and there's no traffic there. So you just take, what do you need to bring? Just a yoga mat and yourself?
Yoga mat and yourself, and maybe some sunscreen, because it's not, it's the longest day of the year. So we really honor the sun that provides us and nourishes us in this life on this planet. And so we honor it, and we do it on the day in this northern hemisphere where we have the most sunlight.
Beautiful. And will there be food trucks, or what can people expect as far as that?
Yeah, there'll be food trucks. We'll have water stations. So we'll have a lot. You can buy food. You can, there'll be all sorts of things. And then there'll be vendors of every type from Indianapolis studios. They'll have booths and participants. There'll be acro yoga. There'll be all sorts of things. So you can, and then it's right in Monument Circle. So if you decide you don't want anything that's there, you can bop over and come right back. So, City Market's right down the way. But we're really centralized, and there'll be bike parking, and we close off the circle so pedestrians can really move about and enjoy. And then the Soldier and Sailors Monument, we're on the Monument Circle.
It's beautiful there. Tell us the website again, one last time before we close.
Yeah, monumentalyoga.com.
Perfect.
And indyyoga.org. Yeah, that's it.
Oh my goodness. Purvi, it has been amazing today. Thank you so much for your time, opening your heart to us and sharing a practice with us, telling about your journey into yoga. So I wish you all the best with Monumental Yoga, and I hope to join you there. I have a beautiful mat, and I hope to put it out there on the cobblestones. It's gorgeous downtown. So I will wrap us up here. From my heart to yours, may you live with ease. This is your host, Amy Morgan, signing off.